Welcome, friends. Uh, Today, we would deal with the various measures which made Aurangzeb so controversial. Till the last lecture, we dealt with a number of interpretations and justifications of why he did so, what were the political compulsions, whether he was acting because he had this religious inclination in his personality, or was he simply reacting to the political, developments which were taking place during his period of time? Today, we would devote our time to deal with some of the major but controversial steps which were taken by Aurangzeb as far as his, uh, one can say, the religious approach was concerned. Now, first thing uh, which historians find difficult to justify in any way is a very mundane, uh, you know, order which he gave. Otherwise, not very significant, not affecting, not threatening the life or anything of anybody, but still which shows his religious attitude. And that is that soon after coming to the throne, Aurangzeb issued orders that the nobles would not be wearing garments of certain colors which were actually forbidden in Islam. वो रंग जो इस्लाम में चमकीले भड़कीले अ, कपड़े जो इस्लाम में मना किए गए हैं, जो सो कॉल्ड नॉन इस्लामिक कलर्स हैं, they would not be worn by any of the nobles, Muslim nobles. Uh, why he did that? What was the rationale behind it? Except for the fact that now through uh, the garments you could recognize who's who. आज जैसे मोदी जी कहते नजर आते हैं कि कपड़ों से पहचानिए कौन. So that is, जिससे कोई और नहीं असर पड़ रहा था, बहुत छोटी सी चीज थी, लेकिन it was a measure which was trying to differentiate between two groups, religious groups, on the basis of the type of clothes which they were wearing. Then there are a number of major steps which cannot in any fashion be justified. For example, um, his attempt at different rates of taxations as far as Hindu and Muslim merchants and traders is concerned. अगर आप मुस्लिम ट्रेडर हैं तो आप अलग रेट देंगे और हिंदू ट्रेडर हैं तो आप अलग रेट देंगे. Now this measure was taken soon after the sack of Surat by Shivaji, 1664. The sack of Surat by Shivaji was a severe blow to the economy of the Mughal Empire. Surat was the economic hub, and by sacking Surat, and we have the accounts how the plundering of the city and the city merchants took place, And if you read the accounts of that period, Shivaji was very indiscriminate. The foreign merchants, the Portuguese, the English, the Hindus, the Muslims, all the merchants suffered great losses. In fact, the economy of Surat came to a standstill after this sack of Surat by Shivaji. It was a great blow to the prestige, economic prestige of the Mughal Empire, no doubt. But soon after that, we find that orders were issued that as far as custom duties were concerned, the duties on the goods which were being brought by the Muslims, they would be charged almost at half the amount which would be charged from the Hindu merchants. The Hindu merchants would be paying 5%, and the Muslim merchants would be paying 2.5% as the custom duty. This actually meant that the Muslims would be paying 100% less. Or you may say that the Hindu merchants would be paying 100% more, twice the amount of custom which the Muslim merchant was going to pay. And there is no justification for this, which was, a discrimination based on religion. जितना भी आप इसको शिवाजी के सैक से जोड़ना चाहिए और जितना भी जस्टिफाई कीजिए कि इकोनॉमी हैड बीन शैटर्ड, तो अगर इकोनॉमी शैटर कर गई थी तो क्या उसका रीजन ये था कि अब आप कॉमनल लाइंस पे टैक्स को डिवाइड कर दीजिए? There are certain historians who try to argue that actually this policy of Aurangzeb was because he wanted the benefit of the Muslim merchants. He wanted, because the Muslim trade was very less, he wanted to give an incentive to them. Now this is all eyewash. That you are going to give some incentive by charging them half the amount of the others. The merchants of that period actually were very intelligent. What they did was that very soon we start getting reports that the Hindu merchants would pass off their merchandise along with the Muslims. And the Muslim merchants readily took the merchandise from their Hindu friends and would pass it on through the customs as their own. And the end result was that the exchequer started suffering. वो क्या रहा था कि अगर मसलन हिंदू को 100 रुपए देना है, जिसपे 50 रुपए मुसलमान को देना है, तो अगर हिंदू का सामान मुसलमान ले जा रहा है, उसको 50 रुपीज में पास कराएगा, 50% पे पास कराएगा, तो उसने हिंदू से तय कर लिया मसलन के 10% वो आपका ले लेगा, ओवर एंड अबव 10% आपसे ले लेगा, पास करा देगा. तो वर्चुअली जहां फॉर एग्जांपल एक हिंदू मर्चेंट को 100 रुपए देने थे, वो 60 रुपए में या 55 रुपए में वो निकल के चला गया, थोड़ा सा इसको बेनिफिट देता हुआ. नुकसान किसका हुआ? It was the state which suffered because only half the rate was being paid for the merchandise because it was passing off as a merchandise of the Muslims. So within some time, very quickly, this regulation simply disappeared. कुछ दिन इसको किया गया, फिर उसके बाद जब देखा गया कि इससे तो बल्कि नुकसान हो रहा है और हिंदुओं का सामान ऑलरेडी वो मुसलमान अपने नाम से लेके निकाल रहे हैं, नुकसान स्टेट को हो रहा है, तो वो खामोशी से उसको अबेंडन कर दिया गया दिस पॉलिसी. नाउ वेदर इट वाज अबेंडन और नॉट, whether it was implemented only for a few weeks or a few years or a few months, whatever the reasons of this regulation might have been, it was a discriminatory move. It was a communal move against the Hindu merchants, and it can never be justified by any argument. And this was something which had never ever happened before as far as the Mughal Empire was concerned. Thirdly, there was another step which makes Aurangzeb appear to be very fundamentalist and communal. More than communal, a fundamentalist Muslim. And that is the alleged ban on music. It is said that because music is haram, forbidden in Islam, so Aurangzeb banned music. It is said that between 1668 to 69, sometime in this particular year, his 8th regnal year, that Aurangzeb banned music. Now, this information that Aurangzeb banned music is given to us by two sources. It is first mentioned by that Italian traveler to the Mughal Empire, Manucci, in Storia di Bungor. He mentions that Aurangzeb, in fact, banned music. And the second source is a Persian source, Khafi Khan, a well-honored historian, who in his Muntakhabul Lubab mentions to the same effect that Aurangzeb went ahead to ban music. Not only ban music, but it is also said, informed to us by both Manucci and Khafi Khan, that not only the musicians were thrown out of service, but the musical instruments were also broken. So banishment of the musicians and the breaking of their instruments. It took place. And the reason given was that it is something which is anti-Islamic. तो चूंकि इस्लाम में ममानियत है, तो अज्यूम ये किया जाता है कि जितने म्यूजिशियंस होंगे वो सब हिंदू होंगे और उनको इन्होंने बैन कर दिया, इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स तोड़ दिए. सर जादूनाथ सरकार, he says that this whole step was through and through religious consideration. ये एक religious policy का एक part था, क्योंकि इस्लाम के खिलाफ था, इसलिए उसको उन्होंने म्यूजिक को खत्म किया था. He goes on to cite that Aurangzeb was so much against music that when he announced the ban and the musicians were thrown out of service, the musicians announced a protest, और किले की दीवार के नीचे they took out a protest procession, and in this procession they carried a bier, एक ताबूत, on their shoulders, crying that music is dead, music is dead. And when Aurangzeb heard this noise from his palace and inquired, "What's happening? क्या हो गया? क्यों रो रहे हैं? क्यों शोर मचा रहे हैं? काहे का जुलूस है?" He was informed that it was the musicians who were taking the taboot of the music. Aurangzeb is said to have smiled and declared, "Tell them to bury it so deep that it never rises once again." The Muslim fundamentalism of Aurangzeb was such, he did not tolerate music at all. इतना इसको डीप बरी करना कि दोबारा से उठ के खड़ी ना हो. So that is the general, textbook theory which is given, that it was the ban on music which took place in 1668-69 was one of the religious steps which Aurangzeb had taken, and it was strictly forbidden in the Mughal Empire, and thus music suffered a lot. जैसे औरंगजेब के पीरियड में कहा जाता है कि जितने भी फाइन आर्ट्स थे, he being a strict Muslim forbade not only music, he discouraged painting. Painting is also something which is anti-Islamic. So he did not give protection or recruit the painters. The Mughal school of painting, which had started during the reign of Akbar, had developed during the reign of Jahangir, reached its peak during the reign of Shah Jahan. Now during the period of Aurangzeb started declining. म्यूजिक तो बैन कर दी थी, लेकिन पेंटिंग का भी डिक्लाइन शुरू हो गया था. क्यों? क्योंकि म्यूजिक की तरह पेंटिंग भी ऐसी चीज है कि जिसको इस्लाम ने मना किया. दैट वाज द रिलीजियस एटीट्यूड ऑफ औरंगजेब. सिमिलरली द आर्किटेक्चर, that it is forbidden in Islam to build tombs and graves, and thus we find that no monumental structures except the mosques were built under Aurangzeb. So all these fine arts, quote, protection given arts, they started declining, and music was something which suffered the most badly amongst them. Now there are certain contrary views which have been put as far as music is concerned. Let me say just a few words about painting before I come to music. As far as painting is concerned, it is a fact that no new development took place as far as Aurangzeb's reign is concerned. कोई नए तरीके की पेंटिंग बनानी नहीं शुरू हुई थी. Why? Because the zenith had been reached. जब एक बार एक पूरी पीक पे जब चीज पहुंच जाती है तो उसके आगे बढ़ना मुश्किल होता. But what had happened as far as painting under Aurangzeb is concerned, that slowly and gradually painting had started percolating down to the masses. Elite से निकल के वो अब बाजार में आ गई थी. And we find that those same traditions, it is also possible that all those artists and painters who had no sponsorship now, because they were not being patronized by the court, they started shifting to the local courts. And we find that slowly and gradually, जहां मिनिएचर पेंटिंग या किताबें इलस्ट्रेट एक कोर्ट में होती थी या चंद कोर्ट में होती थी, अब अचानक हर रीजन में हर जगह के ऊपर होने लगी थी। सवाल ये उठता है कि जो पैट्रनेज था, व्हाई वाज दिस पैट्रनेज withdrawn, say, from the painters? The patronage was withdrawn because we should remember that almost most of the time Aurangzeb was busy in warfare. Once he moved in 1580 to Deccan, he never led a settled life. ये जो फाइन आर्ट्स होती हैं, ये एक सुकून की, पीसफुल लाइफ के पीरियड की चीजें होती हैं. Secondly, we have already dealt with that there was a financial crisis going on. And that is why, due to the shortage of the revenues, possibly shortage of funds, the patronage to the artists and painters were withdrawn. Now, as far as music is concerned, R.P. Tripathi tries to give us a similar type of argument. R.P. Tripathi says that the period when it is said that music was banned is the same period when the purses of the princes and princesses were reduced. जो पर्सनल जो सैलरी दी जाती थी या पैसा दिया जाता था, जो इनके जो रेम्यूनरेशंस थे शहजादों के और शहजादियों के, उसमें अचानक एक ड्रास्टिक घटाव किया गया था, because there was a shortage of money. And music meant, अगर किसी दरबार में पैट्रोनेज दी जा रही है, doesn't mean one musician. It means a whole ensemble, a whole lot of group. It involves large sums of money to give patronage to the troops who are, into music. And possibly because now the court was cutting its wastage. So one of the things where this cut was brought about was that orders were issued that possibly now, because there is a shortage of money, less and less people should be recruited as musicians in the court. Now Manucci himself, who gives us the information that music was banned, it is he who narrates to us the whole incident of the procession where Aurangzeb is supposed to have said that bury the music so deep that it never comes out again. The same Manucci tells us that the harem, each and every queen and the princess was maintaining the ensemble of music in their courts, personal courts. It was never banned. It was never banned. Now, there is a very interesting article written by Catherine Butler Brown. Now, she is known as Catherine Schofield. She has written a paper in the Modern Asian Studies in 2007. Did Aurangzeb ban music? It's a very interesting article in which she tries to argue that in spite of the fact that Manucci and others do inform us that there was some curtailment of music, but there was actually no ban on music because the music kept on flourishing during the reign of Aurangzeb. In fact, Jadunath Sarkar himself tells us about the interests of Aurangzeb as far as music is concerned. He tells us that when Dara was executed, Aurangzeb had written a letter to his father demanding that the musicians who had been recruited, who had been under the charge of Dara, may now be handed over to him because, according to him, I have a shortage of people with good voices. जो खूबसूरत तराने गाने वालों की मेरे पास कमी है, तो आप उनको मेरे पास भेज दीजिए. He was interested in Judaism. Now, even afterwards, ये तो उस वक्त की बात हो गई जब दारा का एग्जीक्यूशन हुआ था. It's before 1668. Music, you would say, was banned in 1668. I am quoting you something जादूनाथ सरकार से जो दारा के एग्जीक्यूशन के बाद हुई थी 1660-61 के आसपास. So I'll give you another example which is cited by Catherine, and that is that in the harem, Manuchi himself cites that there were at least 33 darogas of music, superintendents of music. Daroga kaun hota hai? Superintendent, chief of the musicians. Each having, say, 50 to 100 musicians under their individual charge. They continue. Not only that, आप कह दीजिए कि क्योंकि ये रानियां थीं और इनको पाबंदी लगाना मुश्किल थी तो शायद उनके यहाँ छूट दे दी. बाकी नोबल्स में और कोर्ट में म्यूजिक बंद कर दी गई होगी. हाँ, कोर्ट पे कर दी होगी क्योंकि वोट लगी कहाँ रहा था. Aurangzeb from 1580 onwards was through and through in the field. Even if you look at the period 1668 onwards, you would find that Aurangzeb was actually quite, moving around from place to place. But we have another evidence, a letter which was written around 1690, a letter which Aurangzeb wrote to Prince Azam. एक बाप अपने बेटे को खत लिख रहा है. अब मैं अपनी बेटी को अगर खत लिखूंगा तो क्या लिखूंगा? अगर मैं ये समझता हूं कि शराब पीना बुरी बात है, इफ मैं ये समझता हूं कि सिगरेट पीना अगर बुरी बात है और मैं सबको मना करता घूम रहा हूं कि देखो मत पिया करो, मत पिया करो, तो मैं अपने औलाद को क्या लिखूंगा खत पर? ये लिखूंगा कि आप सिगरेट पीजिए, रोज शाम को शराब बैठ के पिया कीजिए. It is out of question that I would be suggesting something which I think is bad. I will be suggesting to my progeny things which I consider to be good. जो भी मैं उनको एडवाइस दूंगा वो एडवाइस वो नहीं होगी कि जिसको मैं सबके सामने कंडम करता हूं. ये एडवाइस वो होगी which I think is supposed to be good. Now, in this letter, which was written sometime in 1690 to Prince Azam, written by none else but Aurangzeb, he gives certain advices to his son. He says, he gives an example of Shahjahan. बेटा, तुम्हारे दादा के बारे में बता रहा हूं, मेरे बाप. And he goes on to narrate some of the good qualities of Shahjahan, the grandfather of Prince Azam. He says that every evening he would, after the prayers and after he had performed all the other duties, he would relax in his Daulat Khan. And there during the period when he was relaxing, all sort of storytellers, poets, कव्वालाने खुश अलहान, musicians of good voice, musicians with sonorous voice, they would assemble. And Shah Jahan would pass his time till around midnight, hearing to the music in their sweet voice. And this is what I suggest to you, my son. These are some of the habits which you should imbibe, the habits of a cultured man. अगर 1668 में म्यूजिक बैंड हो गई है, औरंगजेब अगर अपने मजहब की वजह से म्यूजिक को बुरा समझता है, पहले तो ये सोचिए कि अगर औरंगजेब का दीनी मसला था कि वो म्यूजिक को हराम समझता है, बयान चलिए उसने बाद में किया, लेकिन अपने बाप से सन 60 में वो अपने भाई के जो म्यूजिशियंस हैं उनको मांग रहा है और ये कह रहा है कि मेरे पास बहुत अच्छे म्यूजिशियंस नहीं है, इसलिए मुझे भेज दीजिए इनको। चलिए हो सकता है कि बाद में 1668 आते आते इसका दीनी रुझान बढ़ा होगा, बात समझ में आई होगी मौलवियों के साथ रहते रहते, जिसमें ये हुआ होगा कि नहीं, मजहब कहता है कि म्यूजिक हराम है तो मुझे हराम करार दे देना चाहिए, उसने हराम करार दे दी। तो अब हराम करार देने के 2 साल के बाद, 3 साल के बाद अपने बेटे को वो हराम चीज क्यों एडवाइस कर रहा है कि ये किया करो, तुम्हारे दादा जान ऐसा करते थे, तुम भी ये करो। It shows that the ban on music was not due to what it is being alleged to be. There must be certain other reasons. Naturally, one of the main reasons for the ban of music is not Muslims are not non-Muslims. अगर आप ये कहें कि they were, Hindus, and that is why the ban on music, because most of the music is played by the Hindus. No. The ban on music is due to some other reason, because we know that a large number of musicians were Muslims. I'll give you one example, cited by Catherine and others who have written on music. Faqirullah, one of the high nobles of Aurangzeb's period. He was not only a good musician, but he wrote a book, Rag Darpan, a book on music. Now, Rag Darpan was written around 1666. In spite of the fact that he was a known musician, जिसने किताब ये की है, फकीरुल्लाह नाम है, he kept on getting enhancement in his mansab till the very end. 1666 में किताब लिखी थी, 1666 से मालूम था कि ये म्यूजिक का एक्सपर्ट है, म्यूजिक इसकी फील्ड है, म्यूजिक हराम है, तो हराम काम कर रहा है, जबकि मैंने तो बैन कर दिया है कि म्यूजिक नहीं बजेगी, और ये बजा भी रहा है, गा भी रहा है, रिक्रूट भी कर रहा है, किताब भी लिख रहा है. He should have been demoted instead of being promoted. No, he was promoted. And what was this Rag Darpan? Rag Darpan is one of the basic books on, if today someone wants to write about the history of music, one has to consider this book, Rag Darpan. Rag Darpan, in fact, is a translation of an older work. Rajaman Singh Tomar, who was a musician, 1486 to 1516, Gwalior Gharana. The person with whom Tansen, or for that matter, Baju Babra, they were originally belonging to his darbar. From there, they were recruited into Mughal service. Raja Man Singh Tomar had a very famous work on music, a musical treatise, Man Kautuhal. Rag Darpan was a translation of that, an exposition of the same work, which became very popular during the reign of Aurangzeb. And Aurangzeb was giving enhancements in the ranks of the person who was forwarding and popularizing this text, Man Kautuhal, which had been written by a Hindu Raja and a musician, a music expert. Another work, Miratul Alam, Bakhtawar Khan, another noble. He had written Miratul Alam, in which there are chapters dealing with music and dance. In fact, Bakhtawar Khan informs us about the musical interests of Aurangzeb himself, that Aurangzeb knew how to play veena. He was a good veena player himself. Bakhtawar Khan says that Aurangzeb had perfection in the art and knowledge of music. A noble who continued even after the music. He is writing after it. Another work which I would mention to you, written by in the court of Aurangzeb, known as Tuhfatul Hind. Now, this Tuhfatul Hind goes on into the details of various tals and rags. जो आज आप ताल और राग के बारे में जानते हैं, ये सारी इंफॉर्मेशन, कितनी तालें होती हैं, कितने राग होते हैं, Tuhfatul Hind, explains all that, all the tals and rags, giving with examples in his chapters. Prince Azam, he was a young man, son of Aurangzeb. Incidentally, he died the same year when Aurangzeb died. ऐसा नहीं है कि अब इनकी कोई ऐसी बातें होंगी जो उन्होंने अपने बाप के मरने के बाद, मेरी एक जिंदगी है, जो एक जिंदगी मेरी वो है जो मेरे फादर के जमाने में थी, एक उसके बाद की है। तो आप कहेंगे कि ये बाप के जमाने तक ऐसे थे और बाप के जाने के बाद अब ये फ्री हो गए तो ऐसे हो गए. But Prince Azam is someone who died the same year as his father. So his whole life is during the period of Aurangzeb, in the reign of Aurangzeb. Now he is not only a good musician himself, but was also an accomplished classical dancer. खुद मौलाना औरंगजेब का बेटा जो है वो तिरक दिन धान धान ताल पे ताल लगाता भी है और उस पे थिरकता भी. He was a famous dancer, not only a singer. He was also a very excellent composer of music. So, at least we should remove ban on music from those aspects which cannot be explained of. I started this lecture by saying कि आज हम उन चीजों को डील करेंगे जो जिनका कोई जस्टिफिकेशन नहीं है. मैंने उसमें जानबूझ के म्यूजिक को इसलिए लिया क्योंकि जस्टिफिकेशन तो है उसका जो मैंने आपके सामने दिया, लेकिन इसको इसलिए यहाँ पे लिया क्योंकि दैट इज वन ऑफ द ग्रेटेस्ट एक्यूजेशंस ऑफ ऑन औरंगजेब, दैट इतने बड़े कट्टरपंथी थे कि म्यूजिक को वो उन्होंने मना किया था क्योंकि इस्लाम में मना. So we see that not denying the fact that he did not give orders, but probably these orders were the same as some of the orders given by अकबर, जिनके बारे में बदाई ने कहा था नक्शा बराब. उसका असर इतना ही था जैसे पानी पे निशान बनाना. जब सेंट्रल एशिया से अकबर के कोई रिश्तेदार आने वाले थे तो अकबर ने ये ऑर्डर दिया था जल्दी जल्दी मिर्जा हकीम के आने से पहले के दरबार में जो सेंट्रल एशियन ट्रेडिशंस हैं, मंगोल ट्रेडिशंस हैं, उनको रिवाइव करो ताकि जब वो आए तो उनको बुरा ना लगे कि यहाँ के ऊपर तो हालात ही बिगड़े हुए हैं. लेकिन बदायूनी लिखता है कि वो उतने ही दिन रहे जितने दिन मिर्जा हकीम यहाँ पे थे, और जैसे ही वो गए तो ऐसा मिट गए जैसे पानी के ऊपर आपने ट्रेसिंग बनाई हो, जैसे पानी के हिलते ही वो खत्म हो जाती है, जहाँ बनाया वहाँ खत्म, वैसे ही वो खत्म हो गए थे. तो अगर ये ऑर्डर दिया भी था जो दिया था उन्होंने, there must have been certain other reasons. R.P. Tripathi says that there were economic reasons, but he himself kept on practicing music. He had his interest in music from the day that he became the king. His son died in the same year when he died, 1707. And during this whole period, he was singing and dancing. No ban. All the Mughal harem, women of the Mughal harem, they were maintaining, musical ensembles. Musical sessions were taking place there. As far as the nobles were concerned, there were a large number of nobles who were practicing music in their own personal capacity and in their courts. Some of them writing on music, some percolating music. Let me end this particular aspect by pointing out that just like painting, music जो बाबर के जमाने से एक सेंट्रल एशियन म्यूजिक और जो इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स यहाँ पे आए थे, by now they had been Indianized and now they were getting percolated into the masses. अब ये जो टेक्स्ट लिखे जा रहे थे, जो ट्रांसलेशंस इन रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट के किए जा रहे थे, उनसे उस म्यूजिक को और ग्रास्प किया जा रहा था, और ताल और इसकी जो नॉलेज इन किताबों से फैल रही थी, अब ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग जो थे उसको सीख रहे थे और फॉलो कर रहे थे. सो इंस्टेड we can say that there was no fall of music, but music in fact came out of the court and percolated into the masses during the reign of Aurangzeb. Let us go back to certain of the other measures which are through and through common. We have seen that music is not one of them. Now, there is a measure through which it is said that Aurangzeb started creating a class of Muslim zamindars. Who were these zamindars? Zamindars were the bhumiyas, the land owning class of the villages, who had hereditary right, hereditary, permanent, non-transferable rights. You remember that all the Rajput chieftains who had been recruited to the court, they were also Watan Jagirdars. They were basically zamindars. अपनी जो landed जो property थी, उसको वतन जागीर मान लिया जाता था. Otherwise, the common jagir was something which was transferable. All the jagirdars were divided into Hindu and Muslim. ईरानी, तुरानी, राजपूत, नॉन राजपूत. तो अगर डिवीजन पर ना जाइए, बारीकी में मत जाइए, तो कम से कम 50-50 का डिवीजन तो था ही, 60-40 का रहा होगा, चलिए. But they were a mixture of Hindu and Muslim as far as Jagirdar were concerned, who were non-permanent, non-hereditary. The only people who were not paying taxes and were Muslims but were not hereditary were the Madad-e-Maash holders, the scholars, poets, theologians, mystics, also known as Lashkar-e-Dua. वो फौज जो दुआ करती थी, क्यों दुआ करती थी? क्योंकि फ्री में मिलता था मदद-ए-माश, a piece of land which was given without any taxation in return. But then this Madad-e-Maash was given to a person. It was not hereditary. Family Madad-e-Maash nahi thi. Isliye we keep on hearing again and again there were inquiries into the Madad-e-Maash holders. जैसे खालसा की इंक्वायरी बैठती थी वैसे मदद-ए-माश की भी बैठती थी कि रिकॉर्ड चेक होते थे कि एक्चुअली किसकी है और कौन इसकी मदद-ए-माश नहीं थी, इसके बाप को मिला था, ये अभी भी कंटिन्यू कर रहा है, तो इंक्वायरी करके उन पे जुर्माना लगा के हटाया जाता था. इट वाज अ नॉन हेरिडिटरी, इंडिविजुअल कैपेसिटी में आपको मिलता था, जहां के ऊपर आप पे नहीं करते थे. जमींदार, बड़ा जमींदार तो राजा ऑफ आमेर और फला होते थे, लेकिन छोटे मोटे लेवल का जो भूमिया जो था, जो थोड़ी बहुत जमीन रखता था, जो उसकी प्रॉपर्टी होती थी, वो गांव में होता था, वो उसकी अपनी प्रॉपर्टी होती थी, उसको कोई टच नहीं करता था. बट ही वुड बी पेइंग द टैक्सेस. But how would he be paying the taxes? We know that in the Mughal taxation system, most of the burden of the higher was put on the shoulders of the lower. जागीरदार अपना बर्डन जमींदार पे शिफ्ट करता था और जमींदार अपना बर्डन जो था वो किसान पे शिफ्ट करता था. जाहिर है कि एक जमींदार वो था जिसके गांव में जो जमीनें होती थी उसमें अगर 100 बीघा जमीन है, किसान की 2 बीघा, लेकिन 2-2 बीघा करके 60 किसान. तो जमींदार ये कोशिश करेगा कि इन 60 के ऊपर इतना लगा दे कि उसका अपना बच जाए. And he would not be paying a number of taxes. You remember from the period of Alauddin Khilji, charai, gharai, ye, tu, main, jo, there were certain privileges which were being enjoyed by these persons because they were also acting as the tax collectors. There was no such class of Muslims. And we know that by 1679, there were a number of revolts by this class. You remember, in fact, throughout the 1670s, balki 1662 onwards, there were a number of, riots, rebellions, revolts. Let me remind you, we have dealt with them. Jats, Saptamis, Nanakpanthis, Sikhs, जिसको आप पुकारते हैं. They were all, जमींदार्स in a way. वो बहस अलग है. इरफान हबीब कहते हैं कि पेजेंट रिवोल्ट था, अथर अली कहते हैं कि जमींदार रिवोल्ट था. फैक्ट इज कि गोखला जाट वाज अ जमींदार, और जब तक के इन जमींदारों की सपोर्ट न मिलेगी प्रेजेंट वो रिवोल्ट नहीं कर सकता. लीडरशिप हैज टू बी प्रोवाइडेड, एंड लीडरशिप वाज प्रोवाइडेड. वो किसान भी परेशान था जिसके से रिवोल्ट कर गया था, लेकिन लीडरशिप तो इसी जमींदार ने प्रोवाइड की थी. वन कैन काउंट देम for all practical purposes as Hindu revolts and as Zamindar revolts also. So 90% of these Zamindars, they were Hindus, and they were revolting during the period of Aurangzeb. Now, what Aurangzeb now did in the face of these revolts and rebellions and the failure of his religious policies, possibly, creating a new group of people whose position would be almost similar to the position of the Hindu Zamindar. What he did was that he made certain Madademash grants into permanent holdings. Madademash को permanent बना दिया, जैसे जमींदार होता था. Certain cases he made them hereditary. तो अब दोनों में फर्क क्या रहा? वो भी अपना वतन रख सकते हैं और ये अपनी जमीन रख सकते हैं. इनको भी टैक्स ही देने हैं, उनको भी देने हैं. ये भी हमेशा रहेंगे, वो भी हमेशा रहेंगे. ये मर जाएंगे तो इनके बेटे होंगे, ये मर जाएंगे तो इनके भी बेटे होंगे. So in fact what Aurangzeb did was that through this way, parallel to the Hindu zamindars, he started creating a class of Madademash holders who were permanent as well as hereditary. So that the problems which had been caused by the zamindars should be mitigated by the creation of a new group to replace them. Further, what Aurangzeb did was that it is alleged that he stopped giving promotions and recruitment to the Rajputs. The policy which he started following was that all those Rajputs who were in service, they would not get enhancement. उनकी सैलरी में enhancement नहीं होगा, उनकी जागीर नहीं बढ़ाई जाएगी. They would not be given any promotion. And no new Rajput would be appointed to the Mughal bureaucracy. मुसलमान हैं तो आप बना दिए जाएंगे, राजपूत हैं तो आपके या तो इजाफा नहीं दिया जाएगा और नए तो बिल्कुल ही नहीं दिए जाएंगे. It is said that this step was aimed at saving the Jagirs. We know that, Abul Fazl Mamuri, the author of Tarikh Aurangzeb, mentions even before Aurangzeb went to the Deccan, Hama Alam Be Jagir Mand. वो कंडीशन थी, ऐसी फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस थी, ऐसे हालात थे कि ऐसा लगता था कि हमा आलम, पूरी जो कायनात है, पूरा जो दुनिया है, बेजागीर मान, बगैर जागीर के. There was a paucity of Jagir. There was no land which could be assigned in Jagir to anybody. And it is said that because there was a paucity of Jagir, even before he went to the Deccan के बाद तो और बढ़ गई थी प्रॉब्लम. इतनी बढ़ गई थी कि वो एक मसल जो अबुल फजल मामूरी भी देते हैं और खाफी खान भी देते हैं कि एक ये कहानी बन गई थी कि अगर किसी बच्चे को अगर मनसब दिया जाता था, अपॉइंटमेंट दिया जाता था, the story was that a child was being awarded a mansab. So someone objected, he is so young, why are you giving the mansab to him at this young age? He can wait, he can get mansab afterwards. So the reply which was given was that don't worry, by the time the Jagir becomes available, he would be an old man with a long white beard. परेशान मत हो, जागीर इसे तभी मिल पाएगी जब ये बुढ़ा होके कमर झुक जाएगी और दाढ़ी जो है वो सफेद लंबी सी इसके हो चुकी होगी, तब जाके कहीं जागीर मिलेगी. तो मिल रहा है मनसब को, अपॉइंटमेंट दिया जा रहा है, देने. That became a joke, but that condition was a condition after the Deccan problem started. But Abul Fazl Mamuri says that even before the Deccan, before 1580-81, the conditions, the Jagirdari crisis was very bad. And Aurangzeb had to do something. And it is said that it is in order to mitigate that problem, that Aurangzeb stopped giving promotions and new appointments. लेकिन अगर जागीर की कमी थी और उसको दूर करने के लिए औरंगजेब को ये स्टेप उठाना था, तो जहां तक मैंने जुमला बोला यहीं पे औरंगजेब को रुक जाना चाहिए था. नो फर्दर enhancement in salaries and no appointments. लेकिन आगे उसके क्या है? ऑफ हिंदूज राजपूत. तो क्या जब मुसलमानों को आप अपॉइंटमेंट दे रहे हैं तो जागीर, what he started doing was, in fact, Bamuri says that these lands, these jagirs, which were saved by not giving promotions to the Rajputs or the no new jagirs being assigned to the Rajputs, the lands and jagirs so saved became loaves and fishes for the Muslims. उन लोगों को घटा के, उनसे छीन के, उनकी जगह के ऊपर मुसलमानों को इन्होंने देना शुरू कर दिया था. इनहैंसमेंट भी और नए जागीर भी. जो वहां से चीजें रोकी थी वो इधर देनी शुरू कर दी. इट वॉज अ थ्रू एंड थ्रू religious discrimination and nothing else. So one cannot, in any fashion, अगर क्राइसिस थी तो फिर सबके लिए थी, फिर सबका अपॉइंटमेंट रोक देना चाहिए था. लेकिन नहीं, एक का आप रोक रहे हैं और एक को आप दे रहे हैं. तो इसमें जो जस्टिफिकेशन दिया जा रहा है दैट इट वाज ड्यू टू द पॉसिटी ऑफ जागीर डजंट अपीयर टू होल्ड. था, क्राइसिस थी, नो डाउट. लेकिन जो औरंगजेब कर रहे थे वो वही कर रहे थे कि जो मजहब से खेलने वाले लोग करते, जो कम्युनल पॉलिटिक्स करने वाले लोग करते, वही कर रहे थे जो आज के हिंदुस्तान में हमको होता बना. So it is something which, that way Aurangzeb was very modern, 20th, 21st century. We know that in 1679, when the Rajput families had revolted, Rathors and Sisodias and others, and their revolt had been joined by Prince Akbar. Prince Akbar had fled to the court of Sambhaji to the Deccan, forcing Aurangzeb to follow the prince and go to the Deccan, pursuing his son, not able to send any of the other sons. Azam ko ya kisi ko kaise bhej dein? What is the guarantee that that very son would not revolt? And once in 1681, Aurangzeb entered into the Deccan. The clashes, Bijapur, Golconda, Marathas, he could never come out of it. Now, we also know that in 1675, just before the Rathors, Shivaji had declared himself, 1674, Shivaji had declared himself as the Raja, king of the Marathas. Hindu Padpadshahi had been formed by Shivaji. He had declared his independence. And so there was much problem as far as Aurangzeb is concerned during this period. We find that from the time of his succession down to 1678, Aurangzeb never thought of imposing jizya. सब कुछ होता रहा, लेकिन औरंगजेब ने जिजिया नहीं लगाया. It was in 1678, 1679, after these problems started, that Jizya was imposed. There is a question, why from 1658 to 79 Aurangzeb did not impose jizya? अगर वो इतना ही कट्टरपंथी थे, अगर इस्लाम के फॉलोअर थे और इस्लाम में जजिया मस्ट है लगाना, तो इस्लाम की खिलाफ वर्जी कर रहे थे क्या? अभी अचानक इस्लाम याद आया था? नो. As I kept on saying throughout, he was using religion. That was the period when all sort of rebellions had taken place. He wanted to corner support by a certain particular section of his nobility. You know that once he entered into the Deccan, he faced the Shias and the Hindus, Marathas, Bijapur and Golconda. He had to pamper the Turanis. He imposed jizya now. प्रिंस अकबर का रिवोल्ट हो चुका है, अकबर याद दिला चुके हैं कि आप अपने खत में कि आप कैसे आए थे, लेकिन इस वक्त तो उनका मकसद दूसरा है. It was at that particular moment that Aurangzeb imposed jizya. There were three, in fact, levels at which jizya was put. The highest amount was rupees 12 per annum, and the lowest was rupees 8 per annum. आज हम जब 12 और 8 कहते हैं तो ऐसा लगता है कि ये तो यूं जेब से निकाला और दे देगा. Remember, we are talking about a time when a common person, say an artisan, a master craftsman, would be drawing a salary of 8 to 10 rupees per month. तो ये जिजिया जो है, जो हाईएस्ट है उनमें, वो 12 रुपए दे रहा है, जो तकरीबन उसके एक मंथ की सैलरी है. हो सकता है कि जो अगर अमीर है थोड़ा सा, तो मंथ से थोड़ी कम हो, लेकिन ये कि अच्छी खासी अमाउंट. और आपको एक एग्जांपल दूं, जैसे अगर आज आप मुझसे, आप बैठे बैठे आप मुझे फोन करें और कहें कि नदीम साहब 2000 रुपए दे दीजिए, तो 2000 क्या मेरे लिए देना बहुत डिफिकल्ट होगा? लेकिन यही 2000 रुपए, if you had asked me before the coming of the sixth pay commission, the total salary which I was enjoying before the sixth pay commission was 2000, and the house on rent which I was trying to get was 3000. I could not afford that house. आज 2000 कुछ नहीं है. ये आप इन टर्म्स मत जाइए. 12 रुपए उस जमाने के हिसाब से सोचिए. 8 रुपए मैंने जैसे कहा कि एक आम कॉमन मैन की मंथली सैलरी के बराबर है. एग्जैक्ट. He is getting around that much of income per month. So that was, ये जो बाज दफा कह के टाल देते हैं ना कि मोनेटरी उसका कुछ नहीं था, बहुत. भाई मेरे, अगर आप डिस्क्रिमिनेशन के नाम पे आप 1 रुपया भी लेंगे, उसकी कोई हैसियत नहीं है. A discrimination is a discrimination. So even if it was economically a very paltry amount, what I am trying to argue is that it was not a paltry amount. Even if you say that it was a paltry amount, it was discriminatory. 1 रुपया भी discriminatory. And here it was, the lowest was equal to the 1 month salary of a common man, a common citizen of that period. That is a fact that let us also discuss who were paying jizya and who were not. Jizya was not being paid who were the Jagirdars and Mansabdars, who were in state service. Jizya was not being imposed on the Brahmins. Jizya was being imposed on the common people. And the common people were being burdened by this discriminatory taxation. It can never in any way be justified. And those who try to justify by saying that it was a nominal tax, जब उनको कुछ nominal communal base कुछ कहा जाता है, they react badly. Remember that even a small communal barb is enough to discriminate. What to talk about difference in taxing, जहां आप एक अमाउंट जितना भी कम हो वो एक क्लास से ले रहे हैं, दूसरे क्लास से भी ले रहे हैं. It was discriminatory and has to be condemned by all means. So Aurangzeb did impose jizya, and jizya was a discriminatory tax. Similarly, let us come to the temple destruction. In the recent years, we have had a number of accounts which try to justify Aurangzeb as far as the temple destructions are concerned. I have read a number of books where it is claimed that it is wrong to say that, nahi, it was not 30,000 temples which were destroyed, only 3,000 were destroyed. चाहे वो 30,000 थी या 3,000 थी या 3 थी. The destruction of a place of worship by a particular religion is discriminatory and has to be condemned. Let us see what Aurangzeb did. As early as 1669, Sir Jadunath Sarkar, in fact, tells us that orders were issued, and there is no doubt to believe what he says. Sir Jadunath is not one of those जो इफ्तिखार अहमद गौरी की तरह या इश्तियाक हुसैन कुरैशी की तरह कोई एक ऐसी चीज साइट कर देंगे जो आप सोर्स पे ढूंढते फिरिएगा वो नहीं मिलेगी. Jadunath writes what is there in the sources, and he mentions that in 1669 orders were given to demolish the schools and temples of the non-Muslims. They were confined orders to a certain place, no doubt, but orders were issued as early as 1669. Maasir Alamgiri, it tells us that around this period, the temple at Malarna, near Jaipur, it was totally destroyed on the orders of Aurangzeb. In 1679, at a time when the Rathore rebellion had taken place, one may justify कि revolt चल रहा था. Orders were issued to demolish the temples. As I said that Jodhpur wale orders ko. Remember that at a time when the revolt was going to start, it had not started. There was discontent among the Rathors. The Jodhpur territory had been declared the Khalsa, and Rani Hadi had written a letter to Aurangzeb that if you give tika to the young child Ajit Singh in our favor, I am ready to demolish all the temples in the Jodhpur region. Sare mandir to war dungi. Aurangzeb had rejected the offer. But once the revolt started, a number of temples in Jodhpur region were demolished. तो क्वेश्चन मार्क तो लग गया ना कि हो सकता है कि रिवोल्ट की वजह से What type of rebellion took place in the region of Gujarat where Somnath was demolished? What rebellion was going on in the region of Varanasi where the famous Vishwanath temple was demolished? What was the condition, political condition in the region of Mathura where the famous Keshav Rai temple was demolished? In 1680, a number of temples were broken at Udaipur. For example, it is said, S.R. Sharma gives a figure that 172 temples in the region of Udaipur were demolished. Uday Sagar temple was demolished. In Chittor, 63 temples were demolished. Now, there was something. हो सकता है कि सही बात है कि 30,000 टेम्पल्स तक की गई हो, चंदी हो. But there were a number of temples which were demolished, some for political reasons, some for which there is actually no reason available. They were demolished. There is no justification. Richard Eaton says, I have quoted Richard Eaton before also, that it was an established practice. But established practice where? Where one dynasty replaced the other. In the case of victory, तो चलिए जोधपुर समझ में आता है. But what about the other places? Richard Eaton की theory वहां लग जाएगी. But what about the other places? Why orders were issued that no new temples would be constructed? Yes, there were temple grants. A large number of grants given during the period of Aurangzeb. It is said, and I have also written in one of my frontline articles, that the quantum of grants given by Aurangzeb appears to be larger than the quantum of grants during the reign of Akbar. You know, if you look at sometimes statistics is very misleading. So quantity grants key. Remember, there were certain grants which had been given to these temples during the reign of Akbar. There were certain grants which were given during the reign of Jahangir. There were certain grants which were given during the reign of Shah Jahan. Aurangzeb continued all the grants which had given in the previous years. तो जाहिर है कि अकबर से तो तादाद बढ़ जाएगी. The fact is that quantum may be more, but there is hardly any new grant which was given to the temples during the reign of Aurangzeb. कोई नई ऐसी मंदिर नहीं थी जिसको नया ग्रांट दिया गया. पुराने मेंटेन किए गए थे जहां दिल चाहा. No new grants. We know that there are a large number of documents which are available. For example, Journal of Bombay Historical Society. That site gives a number of temple grants which were given for the maintenance of the temples. Pakistan Historical Society, there is an article there also, which goes on to argue that देखिए ये grants मौजूद. The Vrindavan documents discovered by Tarapad Mukherjee, edited by Tarapad and Irfan Habib together, translated by Irfan Habib, actually read by Irfan Habib, those documents which are in Persian. A paper written on the Aurangzeb's period by late Professor R.A. Alvi. There are a number of grants even at Vrindavan which were given. Keshav Rai temple bhi Vrindavan mein, which was destroyed. But there are a number of temples, Vaishnava temples, where the grants were continued during the period of Aurangzeb. But as I said, that no new grant appears to have been given, and that is the conclusion which is given by Professor Irfan Habib. But there is one surprising factor. Why is it that the contemporary sources of the period, mind you, there are a number of non-Muslim historians of Aurangzeb's reign. Bhimsen, Nuskhai-Dul-Kusha. You have Isardas Nagar, Futuhat-e-Alamgiri, Sujan Rai Bhandari, Khulasat-ut-Tawarikh. None of them mentions in a very, disturbed manner either the destruction of the temples or the imposition of jizya. None of them. They mention passing reference, लेकिन उसके ऊपर कोई टिप्पणी नहीं करते. None of them is critical. Why? There may be two reasons for this. Either जो हमने देखा है होता है आज भी, कुछ सरकारी लोग होते हैं जो अपनी पोजीशन एंड पेल्फ के लिए, there was a gentleman when Modi ji started, there was a Muslim Lieutenant General who wrote in around 50 newspapers in a single day asking Muslims not to miss the bus. कहा भूल जाइए जो गुजरात में हुआ था, अब मोदी जी प्राइम मिनिस्टर बनने जा रहे हैं और ये एक ऐसी अपॉर्चुनिटी है कि जिसको आपको मिस नहीं करना चाहिए. डोंट मिस द बस. He was a Muslim. He is a Muslim. तो क्या इस टाइप के सरकारी हिंदू थे क्या जो औरंगजेब जो भी कर रहा है उसके ऊपर लिखने से ये बच रहे थे कि they won't write? Now Bhimsen, for example, who has written a number of letters of his survive apart from his other writings. He was in the service not of Aurangzeb. He was under the service of Rao Dalpat Bundela. He was in the Deccan, but not directly in the service of Aurangzeb. And at the moment, he was a little estranged. Dalpat Rao Bundela was estranged from the Mughal Empire, although in the service. तो भीमसेन एक ऐसे नोबल के, एक नॉन मुस्लिम नोबल के अंडर में है जो बहुत ज्यादा खुश नहीं है औरंगजेब. And if you read Bhimsen, you would find that he is quite critical to Aurangzeb. He criticizes Aurangzeb for his Deccan policy. Very critical. He says that Aurangzeb is following the policy of Qilagiri instead of Mulkgiri. किलों पे ये तवज्जो दे रहे हैं जबकि मुल्क हाथ से निकला जा रहा है. Is very critical. He says that from areas from where now even a copper coin is not coming, there was a time when gold was raining like anything. बारिश की तरह हूण बरसते थे, सोना बरसता था. अब वहां से तांबे के सिक्के नहीं मिलते. Such is the condition, ruination of the peasantry under Aurangzeb. But such a man who has nothing to fear Aurangzeb directly, Aurangzeb उनका कुछ बिगाड़ भी नहीं सकते हैं, but he just gives a passing reference to Jizya. He gives a passing, mentions that Fala temple was broken, demolition of temple, bas. Without any rancor, without any comment, without any saying that this is a discrimination. जैसे रोजमर्रा की बात है. That's the politics which is taking place. Why? If he is not afraid, why is he not writing? Problem is that we start looking at Aurangzeb. By we I mean the historians, whether it's Jadunath Sarkar or Shibli Nomani or anybody of the historians who have written on Aurangzeb. Generally, they start looking at him from the perspective of either 19th century or 20th century. Or now, for example, when more recent works are coming from the perspective of the 21st century. We have to shun this habit. During the period 17th century, the situation was different. There was neither a nation nor a feeling of nationalism nor a religious consciousness. One was loyal not to a religion, but was loyal to a clan, to his caste, or to his master. Also remember that, for example, take Jizya. Jizya is not being imposed on that class who are serving the Mughals, the Jagirdars. Jizya is a tax which is not being imposed on the high religious classes, the Brahmins. It is the common people who is paying the jizya, and it is the common people who are being exploited even by these Hindu zamindars. It is the lower castes who are going to pay for it. जो आजकल की जबान में जिसे आप दलित कहेंगे, पसमानदा कहेंगे, दबा हुआ कहेंगे, कल भी नहीं सुना जाता था, मनुस्मृति में भी नहीं सुना गया था, आज भी नहीं सुना जाता है, वो क्लास पे कर रही थी जिजिया. The so-called Hindus, जो elites थे, उसमें भीमसेन भी थे, उसमें ईसरदास नागर भी थे, उसमें कायस्थ, ब्राह्मण, सारे के सारे शामिल थे, उसमें ये रूलर्स, वतन जागीरदार शामिल थे. इनकी सेहत पे नहीं असर पड़ रहा था. They were not concerned about it. Temple, whether Aurangzeb ने जाति की या नहीं की, टेम्पल, ब्रेकिंग ऑफ टेम्पल्स हैड बीन अ ट्रेडिशन. तो कहीं कहीं जाति को भी ये नजरअंदाज कर जाते हैं, इसको ओवरलुक कर जाते हैं. इट वाज लुक एट 17th century from the 17th century point of view. There is only one person who comments adversely on Aurangzeb, and that is Manuji. There is a sentence in Manuji. He heard a rumor in the bazaar. He heard that it is being discussed that when this king dies, the Hindus would take over. So there was a feeling among the common people against Aurangzeb, and that is one of the reasons why soon after the demise of Aurangzeb, his policies, उसके पीछे जो भी पॉलिटिक्स रही हो, बड़ी फाइन पॉलिटिक्स औरंगजेब खेल रहे थे. औरंगजेब की पूरी रिलीजियस पॉलिसी जो थी, वो इसलिए नहीं थी कि वो कट्टरपंथी थे, वो इसलिए थी क्योंकि वो मजहब को, he was using it as a religious tool. But it was the masses who had been discriminated against, and it was those masses who ultimately saw to it that there was a decline in the position of the Mughal emperor. The as far as the general Muslims are concerned, the nobility, Muslim nobility is concerned, मैं बस एक एग्जांपल देके खत्म करता हूँ. Remember at a time when Shivaji had attacked Shaista Khan. Shaista Khan had been injured. He was recalled. After his recall from Deccan, Aurangzeb held a meeting, Darbar lagaya. He was still in the north during that period. And he inquired from the nobles, I want to appoint one of you as the commander in Deccan. कौन जाएगा आप में से? One of the nobles, Shahabuddin Khan, sarcastically remarked, why ask us? Ask the Qazi to raise his hands and pray. अरे जब मुल्लाओं को इतना बढ़ाया हुआ है, मजहब का इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं, तो हमसे क्या कह रहे हैं कि जाके जंग लड़ें? मौलाना से कहिए दुआ मांगे, अपने आप शिवाजी हार जाएंगे. So that sarcastic comment against a powerful Aurangzeb also shows that the Muslim nobility of that period was also taking Aurangzeb for what he did the people and maintain his empire. Thank you.